Good afternoon. I'm Stephanie Ramos. Welcome to ABC News Live First. We are following breaking news on the campaign trail. Former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney is speaking with our very own chief Washington correspondent Jonathan Karl in Detroit about her support for Vice President Harris. Take a listen.
All right. Thank you for having us. Thank you, Debbie Dingell, who I have known at least a couple of decades. And thanks to Steve for welcoming us here. I understand you guys had a speaker here a couple weeks ago. Look, Congresswoman, I just wanted to start with you. You just had an extraordinary day yesterday. You were in Pennsylvania, here in Michigan, in Wisconsin with Kamala Harris. And I've known you for a long time. And I truly never thought I would see you running around with a Democratic presidential nominee throughout the battleground states. But just, I want to start, what was your sense of her? Because you didn't really know her before all of this. So you've spent some real quality time with Kamala Harris. What's your sense of her?
Well, let me say, first of all, wonderful to be here in Detroit. Thank you so much to my dear friend Debbie and to Steve and to John. And it is true that it was a remarkable day yesterday. I have had the chance to spend time with Vice President Harris to talk to her about the challenges and the threats that our country is facing, and to take a measure of who she is as a person. Now, I'm sorry to say I've also spent time with Donald Trump. And, you know, there's a real difference between a candidate, someone who was president, someone who we all watched. We know that he watched the attack on the Capitol on television and refused to tell the mob to go home for over 3 hours. And when you think about that cruelty, and it's not the only example of the cruelty. What we've seen him do in the aftermath of the terrible hurricanes we've just had, lying to people about aid and assistance, it's cruelty. And when I had to make a decision about this race, I could have, and obviously was never, after January 6th, was never going to be in a position where I was supporting Donald Trump. But I believe he's unfit and he's dangerous. But I made the decision beyond that to endorse Vice President Harris. And it is certainly the case that there are policies on which we disagree. But she is somebody who's devoted her life to public service. She is somebody who, even if you disagree with her, and maybe especially if you disagree with her, I can tell you she will listen. You know, when you all in business, when you think about what are you looking for in somebody you hire, you're looking for somebody that you can trust. You're looking for somebody who's going to be responsible, who's going to operate in good faith. You certainly wouldn't hire somebody who was unstable and erratic. And we need to think about this election in those terms. We're hiring somebody for the most important job really in the whole world. And I know that Vice President Harris is absolutely committed to governing in a way that reflects this coalition that has come together to support her. We've never seen anything like the coalition. I mean, it's, as you know, probably it stretches from Taylor Swift to Dick Cheney. And it's a broad coalition, but it is...
And you like both of them, Taylor Swift.
You know what?
Dick Cheney.
I actually love both of them. But it's, you know, we face huge challenges, and we need somebody serious to deal with those challenges. So for me, it was not a tough decision. And at the end of the day, as a conservative, as somebody who's worked all over the world, worked in places where people aren't free, somebody who understands the value, the incredible value, the miracle of this system that we have in this country, there's only one choice. There's only one candidate, in my view, in this race that we can say we'll count on them to uphold the rule of law, and that's Vice President Harris.
Okay, so it's not at all surprising that you are not supporting Trump. I had an interview with you the day that the Republicans voted you out of leadership in the House.
Thanks for reminding me of that. Appreciate
yes.
that.
Yes. And you said to me, I remember vividly, you said, I said, what now? And you said, well, I'm going to do everything that I can do to ensure that Donald Trump is not the Republican presidential nominee, and if he becomes the presidential nominee, to keep him from ever getting near the White House again. Well, he got through the first hurdle. I want to get to him, but Harris is somebody who a lot of Republicans who share your concerns about Trump have said things very similar to what you have said over the past 3.5 years. Will say, she's too far left, I can't support her. Some of those people have come around to supporting Trump. Some are simply saying they're going to write somebody else in.
And some,
yeah,
and I think many more than will say so publicly, will vote for Vice President Harris. When you're facing the situation that we're in today, and the vitriol of our political system, and look, I mean, we could talk for hours about what's happened to the Republican Party and why more elected Republicans won't stand up and speak out. But the numbers of people who served with President Trump, who say never again, senior military officials and national security officials, his chief of staff, people who knew him best, Secretary of Defense, when they're telling all of us never again, we need to listen. And I also just think it's important to recognize that there are many, many Republicans who will cast a vote for her, who may not be up there saying so publicly right now, but who will do the right thing when it comes to it.
But what is your sense of Harris? Obviously took a series of positions when she was preparing to run for president in 2020 in a Democratic primary. Clearly felt that the way to compete in that primary was to be very progressive, get to the left maybe even of Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, Medicare for all, Green New Deal, all of that. Was that the real Kamala Harris, or is she? I mean, what is her? What does she stand for? What's your sense? You spent real quality time with her.
Yeah, I mean,
is she the progressive who tried to get way to the left in 2019, or is she the person that we saw at the Democratic convention?
What I can tell you is, and again, I'm not suggesting that she's a Reagan Republican.
Right.
You know, we have differences. There's no question. But if you listen to what she's saying, if you look at the extent to which, both publicly and privately, she's absolutely committed to, for example, America's leadership role in the world, to the extent to which the United States of America isn't going to have economic security or freedom or national security if we don't lead. You know, if you look at the speech that she gave at the Democratic convention, it was far more Reagan-esque, far more moderate than the speech that Donald Trump gave. And when it comes to the challenges that we face today, I think certainly her views have been informed by her time as vice president. And that's, you know, that's no small thing. I hear people sometimes, I hear men, frankly. I heard John Bolton, I'll just be direct. I heard John Bolton the other day say, oh, she's not qualified. Now think about it. You know, look, he can say he's not going to vote for her. He can say he disagrees with her. But there is no man who was district attorney, attorney general of the state of California, United States senator, vice president of the United States, that people would say they're not qualified. And I think that's...
But how many club championships has she won in golf?
She doesn't cheat at golf. So I would just ask people, this, especially in a place like Michigan, look at the policies, look at the substance. I mean, you know, Donald Trump likes to portray himself as some kind of, you know, expert businessman. And he came here to Detroit, and he trashed the hell out of Detroit. He seems to be completely unaware, you know, that Detroit has an investment-grade bond rating now for the first time in years. He's completely unaware of the renaissance that Detroit is experiencing. And totally, I've had the chance to spend some time with Mayor Duggan and to talk to him about what's happening here in Detroit and the energy, the excitement around this city and this community. And those are the kinds of things that we need leaders, we need people who are elected who are paying attention. Donald Trump is completely focused on being cruel. And the other thing that I would ask, especially the business community, to remember, our entire economy is based upon the rule of law. It's based upon being able to count on stability, being able to count on an investment climate that is undergirded by the rule of law. Donald Trump is at war with the rule of law. And his erratic nature, the extent to which you can't count on what he's going to do at all from one day to the next, and you can't count on anything that he says now. But if you wouldn't hire somebody, if you wouldn't trust somebody to invest with them, then you can't make him president of the United States. It matters too much, and that's what's on the line this November.
So just because we're at the Detroit Economic Club, when he talks about the economy, he portrays this image that things were all fantastic when he was president. I mean, I think he kind of forgets the shutdown of 2020, but you know, but that everything was wonderful, and then all hell broke loose when the Democrats came in, and he's a better steward of the economy.
Yeah.
And the polling is largely shown, I mean, there's some, it seems to be shifting a little bit very recently, but that voters generally, even voters that are not voting for him, have more confidence in Donald Trump than Kamala Harris on the economy.
Well, I think, you know, we've seen recent polling.
Yes, recent polling has moved a little bit, yes.
And that's a big thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know, we always see in every election, there's a big difference between sort of when people are talking about theoretically how they're going to vote, and then when the voting starts, when you get down to it. And there are a lot of things, I think, that are making people really uncomfortable about the economic policies and proposals that he's put forward. I mean, you've got the Wall Street Journal, which has certainly not been a fan of the Democrats, but the Wall Street Journal making clear from having surveyed economists that his economic plans are going to increase inflation more than Vice President Harris's are. His economic plans are going to add to the debt far more than Vice President Harris's will. And I ask people to just think about one point. Donald Trump is now proposing massive across-the-board tariffs. And while you can say, look, I disagree with, you know, a candidate's tax policies, you know that in order to implement tax policy, a president has to get that through Congress. They can't implement it unilaterally. Tariffs are different. A president can do that unilaterally with executive authority. And
as he did.
Right. And so when you hear him talk now about a much more expansive, you know, he says it's the most beautiful word that there is, and he's going to be a tariff president, and he's going to impose tariffs of, you know, 100%, 200%. Think about the fact that he will be able to do that completely unilaterally. And you all know the impact that will have, the idea that that's not going to result in costs being passed on to consumers. And more broadly, we know what those kinds of massive tariffs did in terms of the Great Depression and adding to the Great Depression. So I think partly why you're seeing the polls start to shift is because people are digging in, and they're looking at what he's proposing, and they're looking at his track record. And at the end of the day, the worst thing for the economy of the United States of America is to have a president who won't respect the rule of law, a president who talks about deploying the military to go after the enemy within, a president who will create an America that has abandoned fundamentally our adherence to the Constitution. And you can't delink those two things.
So when you talk about what happened on January 6th, and really importantly, the weeks that led up to January 6th, and the efforts to overturn that presidential election, what do you say, especially to fellow Republicans who, again, expressed many of the same concerns that you've expressed, who say, look, that's the past, we got to stop talking about January 6th, this is focused on the future, the policies of the, you know, of these two candidates. What do you say to that argument that too much, enough about January 6th?
You know,
already,
it's interesting.
What do you say to those people?
I don't know who you're talking about, John. But it's interesting, you know, if you look at the moments, the days and the weeks really right after January 6th, I think there actually was a moment when the Republican Party could have taken that approach.
Yeah.
You know, everyone in the party in leadership, elected in the House, almost everybody, you know, said that that's it. Said this can never happen again. We have to reject what happened. Violence can't be part of our political process. So there was
Kevin McCarthy said that.
Yeah, even Kevin McCarthy. There was a moment when we could have done that and said this isn't who we are as a party and we have to move forward. But for a whole range of reasons, that's not the decision that people like Kevin McCarthy made. They decided instead, and in Kevin's case, it was because large corporations around the country announced they wouldn't be giving money to Republicans in the aftermath of the attack on the Capitol. And Kevin had to get access to funds. That was sort of what kept him in leadership. And so he decided to go down and see Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, mostly to get access to his small dollar donor lists. But that really brought Donald Trump back into the fold. And so, you know, we're in a situation today where the question facing us is, are we going to take that risk again? And I think that what I find is usually the people who say, well, you know, we don't want to talk about January 6th, are elected Republicans who have to rationalize that. Because if they face the truth about the attack, then you can't justify continuing to support Donald Trump.
And I should say that there are those who say they don't want to, you know, stop talking about it, stop focusing on it. And there are those who have totally rewritten the history of what happened on January 6th. So I want to bring to you a moment, you know, obviously one of the searing images of that day was the group of Trump supporters who were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence."
Yeah.
Hang Mike Pence, coupled with the fact that there was actually a gallows on the east side of the Capitol. So you had that going on. You had what you described earlier, which is Donald Trump doing nothing for several hours inside the White House.
And people pleading with him. I mean,
yes.
Very human element of people pleading with him.
Members of his family.
Right, to tell the mob to leave, and he wouldn't do it.
But less than 2 months later, I sat down for an interview with Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago. He'd left the White House. And I asked him.
You're watching
about
Republican
Mike
former
Pence
Congresswoman Liz Cheney in a conversation with our chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl, in Detroit. Cheney has been an outspoken critic of former President Trump since the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Now she's hitting the campaign trail in support of Vice President Harris. She referred to Trump's inaction on January 6th, saying he is unfit, unstable, and dangerous. She says Harris is committed to governing in a way that reflects the broad coalition of supporters from Taylor Swift to Cheney's father, former Vice President Dick Cheney.